Hi guys, Dr. Mo here, and welcome back to my channel. If you are new, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you are returning, welcome back. Today is a monumental moment for the channel. It's the actual first interview here on Dr. Mo, the Renaissance Man. So I want to introduce to some of you my daughter, who will be talking to us today about dealing with chronic depression. I'm honored that she's agreed to actually work with me and interview with me on the channel for the sake of others removing the stigma associated with mental health and depression. So we're just going to jump right into it. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right, so we're going to jump right into it with a few questions. By all means, if you have any additional questions that we don't possibly cover, please add them to the comment section, and we'll do our best to actually get it back to you. Okay, so Kayla, please tell me a little bit about how long have you been dealing with depression?
Okay, so that's like a double part answer. So I would say I've been dealing with depression, knowing that I've been dealing with depression since I was in high school, maybe like 14, 15. But I'm pretty sure I was dealing with it before then. I just hadn't necessarily found the words to express that that's what I was dealing with. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So middle school without knowing, but high school coming to it and knowing.
Okay, and in terms of depression, what are some of those initial symptoms that you experience while dealing with depression?
So for me, it's either two different things. Either I'm overworking myself, like doing a lot, or I'm extremely productive, or then there's the other side of it for me where I am just down. Mm-hmm. Like I lay in my bed. For me, I play my game. I play The Sims. So for me, I'm like obsessively playing my game, and yeah, I'm just like down in my bed. So it's just two different sides. Sometimes it's extremely down, sometimes it's extremely high, and just overworking myself. And then I hit the phase of being down and realizing, wow, I actually been depressed for a while.
And when you are depressed, are you normally interacting with your family and your close friends? And when you're depressed, how does that look in terms of the interaction with those folks?
I'm already kind of introverted, but when it comes to the people in my life, I talk to them a lot. But when I'm depressed, I don't talk to anybody. I'm usually to myself. It usually starts with me just like not calling as much, and then it gets to a point where it's like obsolete and I don't call anybody like at all. And then it's like, hey, just checking on you. It's been a few weeks, it's been a month, it's been 3 months since I talked to you. You okay? And then it's kind of usually that's how I realized that I might have been dealing with some depression at that point.
So do you normally, when you're in the middle of depression, do you feel that there is a disconnect with you and the outside world, or you feel like you just don't want to be bothered with anyone?
Oh, dang, that's a good question. I would definitely say there's like a disconnect, because it's just like, even in the moments where I do feel like being around people, I'm around, but it's also like I'm really just not there or present. So it's just like the disconnect would be their understanding of what it is that I am or am not dealing with, but also at the same time, the disconnect of me, A, verbalizing what it is that I'm feeling or expressing in the moment, and B, also the disconnect of me acknowledging in this moment I'm dealing with some depression, and maybe even though I don't necessarily want to reach out right now, maybe I should, you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So I think it's more of a disconnect for me.
Do you feel that while dealing with depression that everyone should know? I mean, they should assume that you're depressed because you're disconnected and you're isolated? Or do you tell those that care about you that you're going through depression while going through?
No, no, I'm not much of a talker in general. So no, I don't tell people when I'm going through it until like I'm usually on the other side attempting to come out of it. Mm-hmm. Because before, it's like the point of telling you, for me, to tell you before I'm in a space of actually being ready to come out of it, because it's like I could tell you before, but your response is going to be something, you know, uplifting and positive and respectfully. In that moment, I don't want to hear that. Like, okay. I don't want to hear it, and also at the same time, it's just not very. It's kind of discouraging, because it's like I hear those positive things, but I'm in such a down space that I just can't bring myself to feel those things. So it kind of makes me feel even a bit more bad, if that makes sense. So it's like I don't really tell people unless I'm in a space of like trying to come out of it, and then it's like, okay, now I'm ready for that accountability of people checking in on me and actually checking to see if I'm really coming out of it and being able to gauge based off of my interaction with the people in my life.
Okay. And in terms of the impact, the significance of suffering from depression, what would you say, how has it impacted your academic career as well as your professional career?
For me, it's like impacted both tremendously. Like,
I'm sorry, but can you just start with just high school? Because I want to make sure that those that are actually looking on, that have high school children that they interact with or family members, that they can relate and they'll know some of the things that they should look for when trying to identify or assess if their loved one is actually suffering from depression.
yeah, so like in high school for me, it was more of a, I guess, I don't know. I guess because I'm already naturally introverted, people obviously expect that I don't talk to a lot of people, but I do talk to all the people that are like really close to me all the time. So it's just like the first thing would be like the lack of motivation to do anything. Low key becoming a little pessimistic in general about a lot of things. Just general stuff. It could be like, I don't know, I could be watching something on TV and I just could find all the pessimistic things in it. You know what I'm saying? So like I feel like in high school for me, that was obviously a space where I also was dealing with like suicide ideations and also like my own issues with cutting and stuff like that. So those are signs too that I was definitely dealing with depression. What else?
And how about in college?
College, that's where I realized that I also do the thing where it's like extremely overproductive. I was taking 6 classes. I was like extremely organized, and like obviously being organized is not necessarily the worst thing, but it was like extreme. Like I would not deviate from my schedule at all. For me, college is where I experienced the more I'm not sad, so I'm not depressed side of being depressed, and then realizing when I start to crash and then like I'm starting to fail classes because I'm now crashing, dang, you actually been depressed this entire time. So I think that's where I learned that side of my depression in college.
And how about in the workforce? When you were at work and you were depressed, how did that impact your ability to do your job?
Work was making me depressed. Not making me depressed in like the
So it was
like,
a contributing factor.
It definitely was a contributing factor, especially when it's not something that like was like my end goal or whatever. Those types of jobs definitely were a lot of contributing factors to what I already was dealing with on my own. So going to work, it was just like a normal part of the day. So it would just be like, okay, I'm here, I'm gonna put in some effort and then I'm gonna go home.
But do you think that in doing so, did you go beyond the call of duty to provide a great service, or would you say you did less than you were expected to do?
Oh, definitely less.
So you couldn't function at full throttle, or you wasn't a productive employee.
No, I was like bare minimum. I do what I need to do, bare minimum to like make sure things are done, but definitely not like high functioning or anything. Definitely not.
Okay. So in essence, every day you could have potentially been fired because you were substandard.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, it's good to know, because the reality is that for many people, they don't realize that in addition to the depression that they may experience from other areas of their lives, that work could also be a contributing factor.
Yeah.
In terms of getting out of depression, have you, what are some of the things have you been in therapy?
I was about to say, so like for me, the first thing I started doing in college, because it started to cause me to have extreme anxiety to the point where like I would be driving and I would start having anxiety attacks, and it would happen so much to the point where it was just unbearable. So I started going to therapy, and then I got on medication, and those two things have kind of been like the better start. Even if it wasn't something that I wanted to do long term, it was like a great place for me to start, because it allowed me to see what life feels like when I'm not all the time depressed. And don't get me wrong, obviously, even with medication, you still have your moments, but it's just like, I feel a lot better on most days. Like, I can tell a difference and it's not like I feel like a zombie or anything, because I was scared of that at first when I started to take medication, but it just feels like I can recognize ways in which something would have triggered me before, but how it doesn't trigger me now, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very normal. It's just like I'm able to recognize those things. So I would say those were the first two things for me, because once I started therapy and also taking medication, I was able to like better assess and see and find things that are my trigger for me to be depressed, or find things that were my trigger for me to be anxious about things that would then bring me into depression. And for me, my anxiety and my depression go hand in hand. So it's just like one can trigger the other, or the other can trigger the other, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So being able to sit with a therapist and figure out the ways in which they coexist, how I find ways that are triggering to me, and then also then bringing me to a space of being able to I guess bring myself out of it, but also cope with it in the moment.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of your peers,
mm-hmm.
especially your African American peers, because historically in the African American community, mental health is something that we definitely experience, but we don't talk very much about.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that this was something that you could speak to your peers about openly, or is this something that you pretty much hid until you got to age of majority, or at your current age at least?
No, I'm very open and honest about me dealing with depression, because I have like younger cousins and things like that, and if they're depressed, I obviously want them to know they could talk to me about that kind of stuff. So I've always been very open about the fact that I deal with depression, especially in relationships, not even in romantic relationships, but platonic as well. Because for me, because it's something so chronic for me, it a lot of times affects my ability to be there for other people. It affects my ability to communicate with other people, and sometimes I just can't bring myself to do any of those things. And so it's like I would need them to know, like, mm-hmm. It's not you. I'm not trying to be shady. I really just cannot right now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And in terms of the actual interaction, so for the parents that are on here, mm-hmm. do you think what would you say to the parents who may be suspecting that their kids are dealing with depression?
I'd say try to talk to them about it, but if they just don't seem necessarily eager or wanting to talk to you about it, it could be underlying issues as well as to why. So I would definitely say like a therapist might help. High key.
Okay. Because I would say also that it probably is advantageous for them to speak to a therapist, mm-hmm. only because sometimes as a parent, we make decisions that could potentially lead to our kids feeling depressed as well. Oh, yeah. So sometimes although we are unknowingly a part of the problem, mm-hmm. that our kids may be experiencing for one reason or another. Doesn't make you a bad parent, but right. definitely will allow you to give your kid that space that they need. And I would say, before we actually end the interview, I would ask you, what is it that you would want to communicate to everyone as it pertains to depression and the stigma associated with depression?
Oh, that's a really tough one. Like, I would definitely say, like, being a person that deals with depression, you're not a bad person for sometimes stepping away, but also you as someone dealing with depression have to try to find a way that is best for you to communicate those things, if that makes sense. So it's like a two-way street. You have to work with your people and they have to work with you as well. But they can't work with you if you're not A, showing up, or B, just like not even trying to express at some point, some way that is what you're dealing with. And it's nothing to be ashamed of, because we all deal with our own personal things, and depression isn't like, it's obviously a bad feeling in the moment, but it's something that, you can find ways to cope in the moment, and also find ways to bring yourself to a better space, even if it's just for a day. Because a day is still a good day. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, I don't have any more questions for you, but maybe the folks out there actually have questions. And again, if you have any questions that we didn't possibly ask or answer, please, by all means, add them to the comments. If there are other topics that you'd like for us to interview and touch, by all means, add them as well. I'm Dr. Mo, and thanks again for joining this interview with Ikayla. Ikayla, thank you for being my very first I appreciate it. Again, thank you so much. And until next time, goodbye.
Bye.